Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our show. Tonight, Mike and I are joined by Brian Seech. Brian Seech is a friend of the show, a personal friend of ours, and he's very knowledgeable about a number of subjects. He's the organizer and main man at the Center for Crypto Studies. Brian is tonight going to talk about some strange cryptids in Pennsylvania. Good evening, Brian, and welcome to our show.
How you guys doing tonight? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great. It's always a pleasure. As I say, you're very knowledgeable about a number of things. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about in relation to cryptozoological subjects is this strange creature called the Ogua. Have I pronounced it right?
Yeah, Ogua, Agua. I guess either pronunciation would be acceptable, I guess.
So tell us about this particular cryptid. My understanding is it's an enormous turtle. I mean, how often is it sighted, and is it something viable today?
Well, basically, the kind of the legend or the folklore on this creature was, it was an alleged river monster, and it was in the Monongahela and Ohio rivers of Pennsylvania a long time ago. The Native Americans knew about it before any of the European settlers even came here. The Native Americans, they claimed it was large and it was serpentine, and it had large snapping jaws. They also said it would, if you would get too close to the water, this creature would come out and grab you and drag you underneath and drown you and then eat you. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's several different descriptions about what they thought that it actually was. Some say that it was more of a giant turtle, like a giant snapping turtle, but others said that it was more serpentine or kind of like a big salamander type thing. So it seems to be that it was more. We think it was probably more of a tall tale. Passed along by the Native Americans to their younger children. Hey, don't get too close to the water, or the Ogua will grab you and, take you down and kill you. And then I think that passed along to the European settlers who came. They would tell their young children, hey, don't get too close to the water, or the Ogua is there, and he would jump up there and, and eat you. So it you can kind of call it like a long time ago, maybe like a boogeyman type thing. Don't go into the
that was just what
boogeyman will get you. That's what I think. Yes, I think that's what the Ogua really was more than anything, because there's really not a lot written about this creature, like any actual sightings or anything about it. So there is very little about it, but I think it's one of those kind of folklorish type creatures that not many people have ever talked about in Pennsylvania.
Well, that was why I was kind of interested about it. I mean, when I was reading about it, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're the guy who knows far more about Pennsylvania than I do. There was a sighting allegedly in 1983. Is that not correct, or is that true?
That one I haven't heard about. It's possible, but something like that I haven't heard about. Maybe that was maybe possibly that might have been a giant turtle or something like that, because I don't have anything in my records for 83, that claimed that there was a sighting of this creature. Now, again, I could be wrong.
Well, I'll tell you what the reference point is, so maybe it's something to look up in the future. Okay. In 1983, a fisherman named John Edward White claimed to have seen a reddish-brown creature with razor-sharp teeth and a long, flat tail that whipped the water into foam. Yeah. So there's this alleged fisherman now. If he was still alive, he might be a useful reference point. But maybe it's something to pursue. I mean, it does seem to me that the sightings of this thing seem to be very rare, as you say.
Yes.
So when we look at the Ogwa, there's a number of other creatures as well. There's a creature mentioned called Bessie. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, Bessie, or another nickname for that is South Bay Bessie. This was a serpentine creature that is seen in Lake Erie. Okay, one of the first sightings was in 1793 in Sandusky, Ohio. Reportedly, what this creature looks like, it's a snake-like creature between 30 and 40 feet long. It's and is grayish in color. It is mainly seen in northeast Ohio, but we actually have a sighting, a possible sighting of Bessie, and this was actually about 3 years ago up in Erie. We have a gentleman named Robin Swope. He was at a park in Girard Community Park, which is along Lake Erie, and they saw an object moving. He claims it was about a mile or so out. It looked like there was a black head, okay, that it moved up and down, and it crossed. He said it would cross east to west, and it was moving against the waves, okay. He did take several pictures of it, okay, but all you can basically, and he sent them to me, basically you could see is just you see the water and you see like a black dot on it. He couldn't get that great of a picture on his cell phone. So was that this South Bay Bessie has been seen, in Lake Erie? Now, again, most of the sightings have taken place up in Ohio, but I believe another researcher, Stan Gordon, had a sighting of a serpentine creature that was along Prescott State Park, which wouldn't be very far from this park in Girard.
So when they talk about the physical descriptions, could you just go through what Bessie is alleged to look like?
I would say more like a giant snake or a giant eel. They're, about 30 to 40 feet long. Yeah. So, some people say, well, maybe they're just seeing like a lake sturgeon, which, as you know, as you've researched water cryptids, that's one of your main culprits. Is they're not seeing a plesiosaur or something like that, which we kind of all really would wish that they were, right? Let's face it. But the lake sturgeon is probably one of the main culprits of some of these sightings. But it is interesting because Lake Erie is a really big lake, and you wonder could it be maybe like a giant eel or something like that? And people are mistaking it. Then they say, hey, you know what? Oh, that's Bessie. It's a giant eel, or in the case of the Ogwa, maybe it was it was possibly maybe it was a giant snapping turtle. Snapping turtles can get really, really huge. So, one person's eel is another person's Bessie, maybe. So it is interesting. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, I've researched Loch Ness, and I was saying to Amy Vu only the other week that, I'm not as big a proponent. Adrian Shine was a massive proponent of the Loch Ness monster being a sturgeon. I tended to think it was a large eel that people was witnessing, because I'd spoken to fishermen at Foyer down there, and they caught eels with, they described them being as large as the girth as large as a man's waist. And if you see a large eel in those sort of situations, and it's in the water, people's inclination is to call it the Loch Ness monster. And this may well be the case with a number of these creatures. Of course, we love the romantic notion of there being a relic populations of plesiosaurs in these lakes. But really, that's not very viable, and it's not consistent with the ecosystem that would support such creatures. So probably not, is my view. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I growing up as a kid, it was after Bigfoot, of course, was one of my favorites. Just like, wow, because I grew up as loving dinosaurs, and I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be so cool if this was actually a plesiosaur? And then as you get older and you see more and stuff like that, and you read more and research, it kind of like it kills that childlike notion that maybe this was actually a plesiosaur. But I do think that people are seeing some of these things in some of the lakes, like Loch Ness, like Lake Champlain. But unfortunately, it's probably a more mundane explanation of a larger known mammal, or whatever.
Well, I'm not going to dismiss the notion of it, and this interview isn't about me; it's about you. But I did see something very unusual in Lake Selyord, so I'm not dismissing the notion of these things. But normally, I would say that the idea, first of all, the idea that all of these things are just logs is lazy thinking on in terms of people who want to simply skeptically dismiss it. It does. A lot of these sightings are probably, as you say, a more mundane and larger variant of animals that we already know about. Absolutely. So when we look at other things, you mentioned there's something called the Racetown Ray. I don't know anything about that. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is also probably another thing that probably is maybe just a giant eel or something to that effect. Racetown Ray is a nickname of a creature allegedly in a lake here in Pennsylvania called Racetown Lake. It's a reservoir in Huntington County. It is the largest lake that's entirely in Pennsylvania. So sightings of allegedly Racetown Ray, the first one was in 1962. It was by the old Racetown Dam, and the dam was built in 1905. It was destroyed in 1911 to make room for the Army Corps of Engineers new lake as it is now. It has depths about 185 feet, up to 185 feet. But the thing is, there's only been a handful of sightings since 2008. And there is a blurry photo if you would type in Racetown Ray, and it looks kind of Photoshop. So descriptions of this, they seem to be a large serpent-like creature also. They say up to 50 to 60 feet long. It has a reptilian-like head that occasionally comes out of the water. It's another one that's probably just a created monster to get people to come to the lake. Hey, let's go to a lake that might have a monster in it and go looking for it. And the lake, like I said, the lake hasn't been there that long, so could there be some kind of a plesiosaur in it?
Yeah, when something hasn't been that long, that long, you sort of think, well, it's not going to have something in it really that is thousands, if not millions of years old. In the case of a plesiosaur, it's just not going to be likely, is it? No, and that also brings us to another one that you probably never heard of, the Kinzua Dam creature. Have you ever heard that one in Warren County, Pennsylvania? No, I haven't. Tell me. I'm always fascinated to learn about things I don't know much about.
Yeah. This is one it's not really talked about that much. Okay. We have a lake up in Kinzua Lake, or actually the Seneca call it Lake Purfidy, and I hope I'm saying that right. Perfidy. Kinzu means fish in Seneca. The Seneca land was there, and the dam was built in 1960. Okay, it was completed in 65, and then it filled up in 67. The Seneca Indians, they lost most of their historic land grant from Chief Corn Planter. Okay, he was granted the deed, and our government, as we tend to do, we broke the lease, and they actually flooded the back town. There was towns there. There was Indian towns. There was a couple other towns. So they flooded everything to make this dam. So there were reported sightings of a large serpentine creature there. And there's allegedly a video, which I have never seen yet, from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well, that would be something.
I can't find any. I haven't seen it yet. There's some government officials of the creatures in this lake. And they said that this creature had a massive neck, almost 12 feet thick, and also some divers were diving by the dam because they have to dive to do maintenance. And they said that the divers they started to work in cages because they saw not only giant catfish at the bottom of the dam, which we have heard rumors of that here in the Allegheny River by the dams and the Ohio River, but they said the catfish were car sized. But again, is all of that part true, or is that more urban legend? Now, a lot of people up there apparently don't really talk too much about this. I know one guy who lives up there, and he says, he's talked to certain people that is true. So, again, what the ancestral Indians up there, they said, Native Americans, I mean, they said that there is an underground system of tunnels that goes up to Lake Erie. Some people said that the sighting started with the completion of the dam. So, was the dam completed, and was there some underground tunnels or caves that connect to Erie, which is still would be kind of far away. I mean, I don't exactly know how far. Warren County to Erie Lake, I mean, it's not thousands of miles, but it's maybe 100 or so or less. So it's not like it's right next to Lake Erie either. So
no.
It's one of those things. And the interesting thing about that lake is, I know you've heard of the Jacob photos from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
The Jacob of what they claim is a juvenile Bigfoot, but I don't believe that it is.
No.
Those pictures were taken fairly close, what I heard, to that, to Kinzu Dam. And just to kind of digress just a little bit, when we talk about the Jacob photos, I was a member of the PBS for years, and those pictures were actually they contacted the PA Bigfoot Society when those were taken, and they said, we have some pictures, blah blah blah, we're thinking of contacting the BFRO, and we said, we had told them, if you contact the BFRO, you're going to have to sign the rights over to them, okay, for these two pictures, and there were three of them. There was two pictures with bear, and then there was the one that's leaning over, which they claim might be a juvenile Sasquatch. So we told them, hey, you're going to have to, sign those over to the BFRO. So they actually sold them to the BFRO. Those were bought.
How much did they
that
sell
gentleman
them for?
Sold.
Do you know how much they sold
that's been so long ago. It's been so long ago. I really don't remember what the cost was, but they did sell them, and they retain all the rights to those pictures. So, me personally, I think it may be a bear with mange at a different angle.
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by it, really.
You weren't impressed either, then?
No, not really.
Okay.
I wasn't. I thought it was I agree with you. I thought it was a bear with mange. It wasn't a Bigfoot type creature. Not in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think. Now, there's some people that disagree. They think, well, maybe it's an escaped chimp or something like that. I said, no,
no, I don't think so. I mean, I've seen chimps in the wild. I mean, a lot of these people who pontificate, I'm not saying that my opinion is more valid, but one thing I can say is that I've seen a lot of apes and great apes in the wild. I've seen how they behave. I've seen how they walk. I've seen gorillas and orangs in the wild, and etc. And that's very unusual. So I can pretty much picture them and escaped chimps. Not really. Not really.
Yeah. That's what I just didn't, and the circumstances too. There was three pictures, and the other two showed bear cubs, and this one shows, another bear, which might have been the mother bear that had mange and was sick. So
absolutely.
Sometimes the most simplest explanation is the best. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. And when you're looking for explanations, the first thing you should do, as is go for the most plausible and the simplest explanation, and then if you go with that first, and then you gradually rule things out. So when we look at the folklore of Pennsylvania, we've covered a lot of the lake monsters, and I think it's fair to say that your view is that predominantly most of them are either mundane explanations of normal animals or sort of boogeyman tales. Is there any particular cryptid that you think that is core to Pennsylvania beliefs that may have some credibility, and if so, why?
I would think one of the ones would be the broad-top snake. This was a giant snake.
That
There have been sightings of this snake seen in the Broad Top Borough area of Huntington County, and that's in central Pennsylvania. It's very large and black, dark gray with yellow markings. There was one account that was described as being about 40 foot long. Another, the common length is about 15 foot long. The eastern rat snake here, it tops out around 100 inches, one of the bigger snakes. Now, could this be just an extremely, extremely large black snake? So here's something, hey, there could be something to it. I mean, obviously not the length that what people are saying. I think the thing with lengths, and you'll definitely agree probably with measurements, even on some of these flying, cryptids, birds and thunderbirds and things, it's hard to judge how big a creature is if there's no scale behind it. If a snake does go across the road, you need some kind of a scale to try to say, hey, oh, that thing was 20 foot long, or that thing was 15 foot long. It's kind of hard to judge that.
Yeah, and there's a human tendency to exaggerate these things in their mind when they see them. So if you saw I want to talk about flying cryptids anyway, so it's a good opportunity to come on to it, I think. And I'm not dismissing all of them in this way, but I'm simply making the point that if you see a heron, and people said, well, what's the wingspan? Most people would greatly exaggerate the wingspan of the heron when they see it, because it looks like a pterodactyl when it's flying. A lot of them.
Yes.
So it's easy to do, and I'm not saying that that's the case with every witness. I mean, Mike, the producer of this show, very clearly saw something very unusual when he was out there, and he's a woodsman. He's not going to make a mistake about a heron, sort of schoolboy error. So I am interested in it. So do you want to tell us a little bit about flying cryptids in Pennsylvania? Because I know there's quite a few stories about it.
Yeah, well, mainly in Pennsylvania, we have stories of the Thunderbird, and I remember the last time that I was on with you guys, we talked a little bit about the Thunderbird. They're seen mainly up in the they're seen mainly up in the Black Forest, Clinton, counties up like that, right up along the border. There's been a lot of sightings also in Westmoreland County and along the Chestnut Ridge, which Chestnut Ridge also has a lot of Bigfoot sightings, the most in the state, run along that Chestnut Ridge. Some people see them. They say that they're either, they look like either, like you said, pterosaurs, or the other one would be like a giant black eagle called a teratorn. There's like kind of two different versions of our Thunderbird. So again, there's one there that it is very hard when you're looking up in the sky with no, they're not up in a, next to a tree or anything. They're mainly in the sky, or they're flying over the, flying over a car or something like that. We actually just got one about 5 weeks ago, just right here in Beaver County, and she drew it, and she said, oh, the wingspan looked like it was 20 feet, and I asked her how, and I'm thinking maybe, possibly, because we drove down to where she saw it, and we checked it out a little bit, and it's possible the way she was where she was driving was kind of in a valley. The sun was setting. Maybe it could have been maybe a blue heron, and she caught it at a different angle, and it appeared bigger than what it was. So, I don't want to dismiss a lot of these Thunderbird sightings either. But again, with the scale, it's so hard to tell how big a bird. We have turkey vultures here. They're very huge. And, but of course the turkey vultures have the red neck. So, and there's, Stan Gordon, who you've had on your show a couple of times, he's had the most reports of the Thunderbirds in Pennsylvania. So I'm sure he's talked to you in great detail about those also. I'm pretty sure about that.
So we talked about it a little bit. It wasn't really a focus. I mean, I'm interested in these accounts sporadically and what sort of knowledge we can get from them, and that's certainly true. One of the other things, I wanted to pick your brains about is Dogman. I mean, I know there's been sightings in Pennsylvania. I mean, could you describe what your notion of Dogman is and what you think about it? I'm interested in talking about it for a little bit.
Sure. The sightings that our organization, I can't speak for the other organizations, but for our organizations, they're basically seeing what, if you could take a wolf, basically a giant wolf, and put it on to, make it stand up straight and walk. That's about basically what the people are seeing here in Pennsylvania and over in the eastern Ohio, which we've done a couple of reports there. Extremely big, extremely fast on 2 feet. This is the thing, the thing with a Bigfoot too, about how people, can misconstrue a bear with Bigfoot. Well, some of the Bigfoot sightings, this creature just moves too fluidly and too fast on 2 legs for it to be a bear. If you think about it, the sightings, they don't make sense. I mean, a giant wolf, people are seeing a giant wolf that walks at that big, and it has a kind of like a hypnotic effect when it sees you, and it seems like there's a evil, malevolent presence to it. People have seen Bigfoot and they say, I wasn't scared or things like that. When they see this dogman-like creature, there's fear. There's a definite fear when people see these things. I know, if I'm out and I see a giant wolf looking at me, I think I'd be pretty scared too, wouldn't you?
Well, what I'm interested in, have you personally investigated any of these reports yourself? Have you had any interviews with eyewitnesses of Dogman?
Oh yes, actually, since we started, Fred Saluga and I started, and my wife, we started interviewing people. I think it was around 2007, long before a lot of the the major groups and a lot of people were researching this. We started off in I'm trying to think, in Ohio, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, where a woman claims one of these creatures ran across the road. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and she said it looked like the creature from American Werewolf in London. She said it had hair, but it had patches of skin. She said it almost looked like it was kind of morphing like it did in American Werewolf in London. And this creature ran across the road, and it ran really close to a power substation. Now, we've had that in a couple other reports, too, in Westmoreland County and one other place, and it escapes me for a minute, but another one was an eyewitness, and an eyewitness and her daughter were walking in the cemetery right before, this is in Newcastle, right before a major thunderstorm. So the daughter goes back into the car, and the mom says, "I'm just going to go right around the hills, make a quick turn. I'm going to be right back." And there was the storm was coming. They could start to see the lightning in the distance. Well, the mother crests the hill, and as soon as the mother crested the hill to make a turn to come around, this 4-foot-tall dogman creature came out from the woods and was looking around the car, looking in the car where the daughter was, and she was scared, and she honked the horn. And by that time, her mother had come back because it was just a short loop. And she was frantic and she was shaking. And they hurry up and got out of there. But for some of these dogman sightings, is there some kind of element of electricity? And I know it may sound very far-fetched, but if this is one of those interdimensional type creatures, and, I say that to cryptozoologists and they start shaking, but could this be one of those possible interdimensional type creatures that are seen and then they're gone? You know what I mean? They are seen eating. They none of the sightings we have, but like in Wisconsin, the Beast of Bray Road, it was seen eating a carcass. So, I mean, what are they? Are these actual solid flesh and blood creatures, or can they somehow slip in and out somehow? Unknown to science, slip in and out of a portal. Now, I know, Barton Nunley. I'm sure you know Barton Nunley or talked to Barton Nunley. He had a report in Kentucky where a farmer was out in his field, and he sees a shimmer, kind of like if you're driving down the road on a hot day and you look and you see that shimmer on the road, kind of like it almost looks like a mirage, So he said one of these creatures, the farmer said one of these creatures stepped out of that shimmer, and it looked in both directions. It smelled the air. Then it saw him, and it growled, and then it stepped back into the shimmer, and then everything disappeared. So, is that possibly something from another dimension, and I know this isn't, this definitely isn't popular to even mention as, being a cryptozoologist, but there are some reports like that. So I don't know what to categorize a dogman. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but.
Well, I just want to pause it a second. I mean, in the sense that we'll come back to it. When we look at the other creatures, we can give mundane explanations for. With the dogman, the reason I'm interested in it is because, first of all, when I first came across it, I just dismissed it as nonsense, simply because I couldn't see the evolutionary pedigree of how this creature could exist. So I was not remotely interested in it in any way. I just thought, oh, that's a load of crap. Mm-hmm. But I did speak to somebody, I'm not going to ever mention his name, who was a ranger, and he said that he was out doing something at night. I'm not going to go into what he was doing, but he's a very cogent, plausible person. And he was walking around at night, and then he saw this thing which just looked like a giant wolf, sat on a log. He nodded at it, it nodded back at him, and he carried on walking. And he wanted to poo himself, but he kept his composure. He said, I felt like that, if I ran, I would be prey. And I keep hearing a lot of these accounts of these things. Some of them could clearly be misidentification. Some of them could be needy people seeking attention for whatever weak reason that they may have. But this guy wasn't craving attention from me. He was telling it, as he saw it, and he's somebody very familiar with the woods. So it got me a little more interested in what these things might be. And I mean, how many witnesses do you feel like you've interviewed, Brian, over the years from Dog?
We've had. I believe I checked it. I believe we've had over the years, and that's since 2008. Okay, we don't get a lot. I believe we've had 15.
So you've done 15 interviews. Now, when you think about the interviews that you've done, what sort of consistencies, parodies of information have you had?
The consistency is that people. It was disbelief that they're seeing this basically a giant wolf that's walking on 2 feet. Now, we did, out of those 15, one of them was actually just what looked like a giant wolf. So maybe you could say 14. But and that one was on all fours. Okay, but it was said it was very huge, like oversized even for a wolf, and that was in Westmoreland County. So all the sightings, again, the sightings that we're getting, they're consistent with, it's very wolf-like looking. It's not. There are other reports of some of these things looking more like they're different. I think there's about 5 or 6 different classifications, and I'm sure you've looked into it and seen the pictures and the drawings. But ours are basically the same, the ones that we get. And most of the times they're just, they're walking across the road or they're in the woods. We just got an older one from Ohio. This was about a month ago. I think it was up by around Norton, Ohio, and this creature was just standing there. He was going hunting in the morning. It was already in the morning, and he saw it, and this thing had red eyes, and it was just staring at him as he drove. It was in disbelief when he drove by, and I think disbelief is a word that I've heard in 5 or 6 cases. They just couldn't, I was at this one picnic one time, and one of the ones we got up in Westmoreland County, and he said, we were talking, we had happened to be talking about Linda Godfrey in the Beast of Bray Road, and I says, this thing looked like a werewolf, and the guy turned around, and he had like a look of shock. He said, that's what I saw, and he goes, and it looked like a damn werewolf, and his face got kind of pale, and he goes, that's what I saw. And in this instance also, this creature went from one side of the road to another. There was a power substation there also, and there was actually like a hole in the fence, and this thing crawled right underneath the hole, and then he lost sight of it. So again, what's the thing with power substations? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, unless these creatures.
I mean, it's interesting. Sorry to pause you again. Are you saying that they are most commonly, just so I'm clear, they're most commonly sighted around electrical power stations and things like that?
Well, in about 4 of our in about three of our things, it was seen directly going into a power station or very close, and the other one was right before a storm when there was a massive charge of electricity. So, again, is there, in the other 11 there wasn't. It was just seen. So, I don't know. It's just a small statistical, like what, 4 out of 4, 4 do, 11 don't. So, I don't know what kind of percentage that is, but. Well, I don't think a lot of people, when they're talking about dogman, I don't think that they're talking about them going into electrical or near power substations. I think it's probably the opposite.
Okay. So when we think about them, and obviously you've thought about them a lot over the years,
mm-hmm.
What are they then, Brian?
Well, I, even to this day, Adam, I don't know. When I first started researching this, I'm like, it was about the Beast of Bray Road with Linda Gottfried. I'm like, wait a minute. now there's actually could be, and I use the term werewolf. I use it, basically we call them dog man, but I use the term werewolf, maybe too much. But I'm like, these creatures, this looks like a werewolf. I mean, is this possible? And I was like, I didn't know how to process that even at the time. Even today, when people ask me, what do you think it is? I'm like, I would say if it's anything, it would probably be some kind of interdimensional thing, because if we were to put Bigfoot and Dogman out there, and then we could put winged entities, and maybe they all get together in the field and have a big party, it's kind of strange imagination that there's all of these different.
We'll come on to Bigfoot in a minute. I mean, I just want to. So you basically think there's some sort of is some sort of supernatural thing connected with Dogman. Is that fair to say?
I think it's very fair to say. Yeah. I don't think it's a creature that like a possible Bigfoot that would be out there. That's, again, my opinion. And hey, if I'm wrong, that's fine. But it just doesn't make sense. These sightings don't make sense. And I think a lot of the researchers who research it will tell you the same thing. There's another element to these things.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's very, very interesting. And what the last thing I want to ask you in relation to this, because I want to move on to Bigfoot and talk about that completely separate thing, is it's my understanding that when people have encounters with these things, they're almost universally malevolent or bad or evil in some ways. Is that fair?
Definitely fair. This is what the people say that they feel when they see them. I've never, not one of them has said, yeah, I just looked out the window and I saw a werewolf and I want to go up and pet it, or no, it's like I can't believe this thing. This thing looked at me with the look, like it looked through me. It looked evil. You don't get a good sense. I have never had one encounter, the ones that the people were like, it's just a giant wolf, and it's like, wow, I can't believe this. There's a fear factor involved with these things. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay, cool. Now, I want to talk to you about Bigfoot, not least because Bigfoot has been in the news in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is allegedly, according to something from the Travel Channel, the best place, or one of the best places in the United States to see Bigfoot. Is that fair? What do you think? Tell me.
Yeah, I've read the article. I actually got tagged in that article on Facebook about 8 or 9 times, and I told my wife, I said, wow, look, somebody else tagged me in this. I mean, I know that they know I'm interested in Bigfoot, so they tagged me. Pennsylvania has a long history of Bigfoot sightings. It is a very long history. Researchers like Stan Gordon, who you've interviewed, and one of my mentors, Dr. Paul Johnson, they both ran research groups in the 70s into the 80s, and they had people out there. If there was a sighting, say in Beaver County, they could have somebody there within 40 minutes to an hour. And there's a lot of, I mean, as far as a number, the one article that you read that said that there was about, the BFRO said there was about 1,300, I believe, or something like that. Now, we have a couple people here, George Workman, Mary Fabian. They have a website, and we send them some forms, some reports too. I believe they have about 550 documented. Now, I know there's a lot more than that. There's probably over 1,000 recorded sightings of Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. Now, I know Ohio has just as many, if not more. But there's also a little bit more researchers in Ohio than Pennsylvania. Although Pennsylvania's getting there, there's more researchers in Ohio per the land than there is here in Pennsylvania. But yeah, I think it would be safe to say, as far as numbers, I would say probably Pennsylvania would be fourth or fifth. No worse than fifth. As far as number of reported, I think that has to be really said, is reported sightings. There's a big difference between sightings and reported. These people are actually reporting them to an agency or another group, and they're documented. So, that's what I mean about reported.
Yeah, and is there a classic Pennsylvania Bigfoot physical description? Is it larger or smaller than, say, the ones in Texas or the Pacific Northwest? How does it work out, Brian?
I'd say about the average is probably about 6 to 8 feet, about 500 pounds, somewhat skinnier than the ones out west seem to be bigger. These ones here seem to be a little bit smaller. Very, very fast, very elusive. A lot of the traits that these Bigfoot here have is the same as out west. Now there's more. There's more cover, more places they can go on the Pacific Northwest. But if you were to drive through Pennsylvania, much of Pennsylvania is forested. Actually, Pennsylvania, we have about 59% of forested land, which is about 16.7 million acres, and we have 29.6 million acres in PA. So there is a lot of places that a creature like that, like a Bigfoot, could potentially hide. So,
and when you obviously you've done a lot of interviews of these of accounts, can you give us an example or examples of some of the more recent credible assessments that you've made?
One of the more recent, we haven't got one. Anything recent for a while, probably about 2 years. We get occasionally older ones. We did get a couple here from Beaver County, but they were older ones. But the people said, "Hey, I saw this one. This was out in Independence Township. Saw it out in the wood line. It was just it was huge. It was massive. It was looking at me. He was probably about maybe 55, 60 yards away, maybe 50 yards, maybe." And he said that he went out on his deck and he saw this thing just staring at him. So again, he was curious, but he was also leery. He watched it and then he went back into the house to get a camera. And then when he came back, it was gone. Another one, a lady saw it. This was probably about a year before that. Saw it driving down the road. This creature was standing in the middle of the road, and she gets close to it, and this thing just runs off into the other part of the wood line. So typically, the good many of the cases that we get are just a creature either standing there watching a person, or they see this thing for a fleeting moment as it's running across the road to the other side. And some people ask me, "What's the best thing to do? What's the best thing to try to go look for a Bigfoot?" I said, "Drive down some of these old roads at night." I mean, more people see these creatures alongside the roads or just running across the roads. Or if they're just out having fun, or they're around a campfire, not paying attention, some of these things they're very curious. I call us, we're people TV to the Sasquatch. I always tell people they watch us. They love women. They love children. They just like to watch. They like to see what we do. We're very interest for them, and we are also the number one apex predator in the world. So believe me, they watch us. They watch us, but they watch us from a distance.
Why do you say that they are particularly interested in women and children?
It's just the reports. If you read a lot of the reports in general, I think the Bigfoot look at women and children is not a threat. Especially if they're the female Sasquatches, they see the young, they see kids, and maybe that maternal instinct takes over. And I don't think women are a threat. Whereas a male, they consider male with guns and aggressive. So, and it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah. Have you heard of any accounts of them being aggressive, as in the Bigfoot being aggressive in any way?
Well, we've heard reports of them throwing rocks, bluff charges. They'll be in the woods. You might hear them throwing logs or sticks or whatever, grunting, screaming. Those are the most. I've never heard of a report where they've actually attacked and hurt somebody.
So when you think about Bigfoot, I mean, it's the same sort of question as a dog man, really, Brian. I mean, what do you think Bigfoot is?
Well, if I had to guess, still I think one of the best things out there. It's possibly maybe it's some kind of an undocumented North American primate, and still probably maybe the best answer for now. I'm okay with changing my point of view if more evidence comes along. I know there are a lot of people who think that the Bigfoot are interdimensional also. They can come and go. I mean, I'm on the fence about it, but I'm still more slightly on the side that maybe it is a flesh and blood animal out there. It's just extremely, extremely good at hiding, extremely, good at avoiding capture. But let me ask you a question now. What do you think? Let's project another 20 years down the road, and we still don't have a Sasquatch body. What are your views going to change?
Are my views going to change? Well, I should state what my views are, I guess, as a starting point.
Okay.
My view would be that I'm not persuaded by any evidence that it's a supernatural entity. I think the evidence bar would have to be extremely high for me to be persuaded like that. So for me right now, it's a flesh and blood creature which is pretty rare and very elusive, and predominantly nocturnal. I think its intelligence level is commensurate. It's greater than a gorilla's or something like that, but probably not as high as ours. It may have abilities which we may define as powers, but they could just be ones that we've lost through evolutionary terms. So, for example, it could be very good at hearing and things like that. I mean, I don't know. All of this is conjecture. I find it a massive stretch to say that some people say, they're connected with UFOs and things like that. And I've never seen anything that remotely has persuaded me that that's the case. I think it's just people's imaginations, and they want that to be the case. But you know what? I don't care if I'm wrong. I have no ego about it whatsoever. I'm just interested in answers to the questions. So would it matter if it was 20 years down the line? Well, probably not, unless the geography of these areas changes radically. I can't see why that would matter. I don't want to be one of these people who is an old man who's bitter because he hasn't found it personally. And I can think of a couple of examples, and although I'm not going to name them, I don't think it's constructive. If the mystery goes on and you and I are in the ground, then it goes on. I mean, I'd like it not to go on. I'd like to know some answers, and that's what I've strived for all my life. But it's never about me. It's never about you, and you don't strike me as having a large ego either about these things.
No.
The reason I got into all of this, Brian, was intellectual curiosity and also a desire for adventure. And that hasn't changed, and it wouldn't change if I was barely crawling across the ground. So the answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is no, I don't think so. But there we are.
Okay. Because you wonder, as many people that are looking for it right now, and we're encroaching more and more on their territory. If indeed it is just a flesh and blood creature, we're at one point we are going to have to finally have some evidence that we could. Well, it can't stay elusive forever.
It could just die out. That means species can peace out and die, and that I think may well end up being the case with the orang pendek in Sumatra as the environment goes. Yeah, you may have more encounters initially as species try to adapt, but if they don't adapt, or that's it. I agree with you that the most likely scenario for a Bigfoot being found isn't all these guys who go out into the woods all the time knocking on trees. It's Mr. and Mrs. Normal driving home after a party one night, and Mary Beth hits one. That's always the most likely scenario for a body, not for everybody wandering around in combat gear, thinking they're going to get one, because they're just not. It's going to outperform them every time. But that's my view. I wanted to just touch again, moving away from the cryptozoology subjects, moving away from the folklore. I know that you have researched a broad sphere of Fortean subjects, and one of the things that you've researched quite a bit is UFOs, and I want to really touch on that, because obviously Mike and I are interested in that subject as well, and so are our listeners. So tell us a little bit about UFOs in Pennsylvania. What have you been up to? What have you found?
Well, Pennsylvania is another state that we've had a good deal of big case incidences here. There was a Prescow incident in '66 where a UFO landed, and this is one of those cases where there was apparently a gorilla Bigfoot-like creature that was seen shortly after it landed. And the Project Blue Book was there, and there was an actual landing site on the Beach 6 up in Prescott State Park. There was one of my favorite ones is the UFO chase from Ravenna in Ohio to Conway here in Pennsylvania. Now Conway's just right across the river from me, so two police officers chased this UFO 86 miles from Ravenna to Conway, PA, and it stopped, and it shot straight up, and it disappeared. And if you've seen the movie Close Encounters, which I'm sure most people have, that UFO chase on there was based on the incident that ended across the river from me. That's why it's always been one of my favorites.
So it's actually based on this? Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty. I always tell people there's one other real quick thing on there. You remember when he built the mound in his living room? When his wife left, he starts tearing all these pictures down. And there's one picture there that was taken over in Beaver. It's called here it's known as the James Lucci photo. And it ended up being fake. They came out with they actually asked the kid later on, this was about 10 years ago, because that picture happened, I think, in 67 or 68. And he said, he says, I took a pie plate up to a light, and it was fake. But he didn't want to tell everybody because he originally did it as a joke, and the word got around and the government came, and he was scared that the government was going to be mad at him. So he says, this was real. This wasn't fake. So there's two instances in Close Encounters of the Third Kind that dealt with Beaver County. So it's kind of like a cool little thing I like to tell people around here anyway. But we actually had a sighting, and it took place in October 30th of 97. And these were two triangle-shaped craft. I think it was about 7:30 p.m. It was during trick-or-treating night here in Hopewell. And where I live now, it just happened right around the corner is where my wife's family still lives. So my son was there. He was finishing up trick-or-treating, and my son and my wife and my wife's mom and dad were standing there, and we look up, and we see these two triangle-shaped craft that if you look across the river, they up high, they did two figure eights, like they were doing like an aerial show, real slow. And then they moved over top of, and they went over top of us, and kids were stopping and staring, and parents were stopping and staring, looking at this thing. And then they just moved, silently, and they were silent. They weren't up that far, and you heard nothing. And we live by the airport here. We're about 16 minutes from the Pittsburgh airport. We know airplanes. You hear them all the time. You didn't hear anything. And just like last year, what I found out, this was interesting because we give presentations around here, and we talked about that at a presentation. Well, gentleman, he put his hand up. He says, I'm a Aliquippa not a congressman, a Aliquippa official. And he says, that night, I remember that night because there were over 300 calls to 911 about people seeing that craft. And I'm like, wow, that's even more validation. Stan Gordon also got a bunch of calls that night about those two crafts. So that was the biggest one that we've seen. And even to today, I'm thinking, well, pretty possibly maybe those were just military doing some kind of maneuver. Normally you would think that they wouldn't, do low-level maneuvers like that over a town. But if they were, I will say this: they were silent, and you wouldn't have known unless you looked up. And hopefully they're ours, and I would be glad they're ours and not our enemies. I will tell you that, because they could have been on you, and if you weren't looking up, if they had a payload or something, you'd be gone. I mean, it was just amazing.
I mean, it raises a point, and it's this. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that many of the aircraft that forces developed by, say, the United States are not revealed to the public for very good reason. Mm-hmm. You don't want your enemies to know your latest technology, and some of these things could have been developed for 20 years before the public know what they are. Do you think it's fair to say that a number of these UFOs are in fact technology which, for good reason, is not revealed to the public?
Oh, yeah. I would think the old thing, with UFO sightings is over 90% are explainable by weather phenomena, misidentification of aircraft or hoaxes or whatever it may be. Only a small percent. And within that 90% also, I do think that there are, some military craft and projects and things like that. So only a very small percentage of sightings actually amount to anything. Because we were both, my wife and I were both UFO investigators. We haven't been over about 6 or 7 years now, but we investigated cases, and mainly most of them you got were, hey, I saw a light in the sky. Okay, can you give me more? No, it's just a light and it disappeared. Or, the structured craft, we didn't get many of those. So, we did get an interesting one up here in Butler. That it was around Christmas time. I think it was like 3 days after Christmas, and this person looks up. He takes his dog, and his dog is like looking up, and he sees this circular craft with lights in it. And we actually have a picture of this somewhere in our files. So he ran in, and he was able to grab his camera because it was moving really slow. He got a picture of it. So we go investigate this case, and the guy hands me a piece of paper. He goes, well, you check out. I says, well, what do you mean? He says, you check out. You're who you say you are. He goes, I checked you out through the government. And I have a piece of paper. He says, yeah. He goes, you are a member. I said, well, I know that. I know who I am. I think he thought I wasn't. So he said that he checked me out. He was in the government, and this was a craft he'd never seen. So, but it was an interesting report. We put that down as unidentified. It was some kind of a craft with lights. It was a circular craft, lights around it, and one light in the middle. So that was one of the more interesting ones we did in MUFON. We ended up just quitting because we weren't getting that great of cases. We were just getting a light in the sky, and you really couldn't tell much. Some of the people, they didn't get back to you after you talked with them. So we decided, hey, let's put our focus and energy somewhere else if we're not going to get that much out of it.
Awesome. Now we're practically running out of time, and we've covered a lot of things. So what's next for you, Brian?
Well, what's next is we're actually starting a new project. It's called LAE, Light Anomaly Explorations, and we have already started to do some things. We're going to be studying these the spook lights, the ghost lights. There's a lot of people. What got me interested real quick, and I know we're probably out of time. Is with some of these sightings of Bigfoot and stuff like that, the people are starting to report now these light balls, these light balls, basically, while they're in the woods bigfooting, while they're in the woods camping, while they're walking down the street at night. And there's not a lot of research being done on them, to be honest with you. And we're starting to collect reports. We have another interesting aspect of this, which we can't reveal right now, but it's pretty new. And down the road, we're going to reveal that. But so that's going to be kind of like a little bit of our focus. Going to kind of get away from the cryptids just a little bit, and go on this trail and see what we got. So.
Awesome, very exciting. Well, please keep us updated with how you're getting on. I mean, as ever, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the show. You have a number of fascinating stories and anecdotes over many, many years of research, and thank you very much for your contribution to this phenomenon. And thank you ever so much for being a guest on our show tonight, Brian.
Oh, I enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you in October.
Yeah, we'll be meeting up once again at Creature Weekend in October, and it will be my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Brian Seech. Next week, there will be no show. I'm off into the middle of nowhere, literally in Alaska. It promises to be an exciting adventure. But I will speak to you soon. Thanks ever so much to our awesome guest, Brian Seech, and thanks ever so much to Mike for producing the show. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you.